Happy motherfucking Halloween. It's the spookiest goddamn day of the goddamn year, and we're the spookiest goddamn boys on the fucking planet.
Trick or treat.
Trick or treat, motherfucker.
Smell my feet.
Get your fucking candy fix and your crack cocaine fix and whatever else, because chaos reigns today. Am I right, boys?
I guess.
Welcome to the pod, people. Halloween Spooktacular Season 2. I'm the Hack-A-Lantern, Matisse Van Rossum.
I'm the treat boy, Ben Sheets.
And I'm the guest monster deluxe.
Oh, Cleveland, I thought you could do better than that.
You get the participation trophy
One
this time,
spooky
bud.
boy.
That's Cleveland Mosier.
Hello, it's me.
Silver Star, you tried.
And it's our favorite day of the year. It is Halloween. Well, I guess technically not when we're recording this, but when you're listening to this, it'll be Halloween. So
No, we record on the same day we
that's
release.
right. We record and release on the same day.
You gotta keep up kayfabe.
Because I am a editing extraordinaire, and I can do that shit same day, no problem, you know?
We don't edit. This is just how we talk, you know?
Wait, this isn't live radio?
Oh, fuck, we're streaming.
Ah, shit.
And now a word from our sponsors.
Have you ever had a problem with too many toes? Well, try Dr. Framblet's Toe Away Cream. Get those extra toes out of here.
Thanks, Dr. Framblets.
No problem.
Now I have a normal number of toes.
Yep.
Now back to our regularly scheduled programming. Yeah, we're talking about Trick or Treat today. A very special, very fun Halloween spectacular film. This was your first time seeing it, Cleveland, correct?
It was.
This was my second time, I think.
I've seen it a bunch of times. Probably 4 or 5 times now. Like, I really like this movie.
I like this movie a lot too, and I think
Same.
it's a really good one for a Halloween episode, because I think it really captures the spirit of Halloween and like watching scary movies around this time of year, and really sort of paying homage to a lot of Halloween tropes and then also kind of turning them on their heads. It is directed and written by Michael Dougherty.
Yeah.
Okay. Who we've talked about on the show before, who did Krampus. Why does he do exclusively seasonal themed horror movies?
I think it's a new thing for him. Before, he was mainly just writing stuff. Like, I know he wrote X-Men 2, and I think X-Men Apocalypse, which was one of the
That's
newer
a terrible
ones.
movie.
Yeah.
I didn't know he wrote that. That's
Yeah.
actually a huge shame. But I don't know what we're going to see from him next. He's done Halloween and Christmas. Is he going to do the next big Thanksgiving horror movie or Mardi Gras horror movie?
I think it's going to be a Valentine's movie.
It's going to be an Arbor
This
Day
year,
horror movie.
Love finds everyone.
Earth Day horror movie.
Oh, yeah.
We've been damaging the Earth for years.
So just
And now
2012?
the Earth damages us.
Al Gore is a serial killer.
Written and directed by Michael Dougherty. But let's get back on topic. We're rambling a lot today. Trick or Treat is a anthology horror film, but kind of different from your run-of-the-mill, more traditional anthology-style film like Creepshow. Obviously heavily inspired by Creepshow and other such films, Tales from the Crypt and shit like that. But it's like different stories are all connected and taking place at the same time, and they're all kind of set up individually at the beginning and then played out, you know, over the course of the movie.
Well, it's really well written in how, like, usually with anthology movies, most of the stories are pretty standalone. And I would say, like, the core idea of every one of these stories is pretty standalone, but the details interconnect within them, which is
quite well.
really nicely done. And on top of that, like, when the movie starts, it kind of intercuts between them, but when they're telling the main crux of
Right.
each story, they let it have time to focus on each one, which I think is really nice.
It also allows them to transition between them seamlessly, which is another thing that I really appreciate. It's not like your standard anthology where you've got like a framing narrative and each of the standalone stories are being told within the framing narrative. You know, they have a hard beginning and a hard end. And in this one,
They still have a framing narrative.
they definitely still have a framing narrative, but like they transition between the stories so smoothly that it's not immediately apparent that they've finished with one and are moving into another. There's kind of like a transition. I think that works really well. It makes the whole film seem really cohesive.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we first sat down and y'all told me it was going to be an anthology film, I was expecting something pretty segmented for sure. I was very pleasantly surprised by how everything was netted together.
Yeah, well, and the framing narrative it uses, the trick-or-treat boy that is on the cover and stuff.
Yeah, does he have an iconic name?
I don't know, the treat boy.
Treat boy.
Treat boy works for me.
Yeah. He appears throughout the movie, and he's almost like a signature mascot.
Yeah, he's like the
in
puppet
a way.
master. You see him sort of overseeing every one of the events.
It's
He
a
shows
cool
up in all
way
of
to
them.
tie everything together, I think, without feeling too hackneyed.
Yeah, which is good. If he'd just been like the core, like the key monster for every story, which is what I was expecting, I think it would have.
Oh yeah, then it would have just felt weird and needlessly episodic.
Yeah.
For a movie with one central villain, and so it's not. But he does, like you said, he's
Puppet
kind
master.
of he's kind of overseeing the whole thing. He shows up in each one of the stories.
Yeah, which is absolutely the right way to do it. I mean, this film definitely set me up with low expectations going in. I was, critiquing it pretty heavily at the beginning.
I think they do a really good job of setting up the idea of horror traditions right from the beginning.
Right.
Because the first thing you see is this couple, and they're coming back from a Halloween parade.
Yeah.
And the woman in the relationship wants to blow out the jack-o'-lantern and take down all the Halloween.
Yeah, the wife wants to take down the Halloween decorations the night of while
Yeah,
kids are still out and about trick-or-treating. Because her mother's coming in the next day and wouldn't be pleased, even though she's an adult.
Yeah.
Like,
while the guy is like, it's tradition, it's bad luck to, blow out the jack-o'-lantern and do all that stuff.
and then the wife's like, but I'm in a horror movie, so I need to break tradition so I can die.
Well, that's the thing, like throughout the whole movie, it sets up this idea of both tradition in a sense of holiday traditions and what that means, as well as traditions in the sense of horror movies.
Horror tropes.
Yeah, and horror
and
tropes.
then subverting them.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I think the treat boy character kind of plays a good symbol throughout the movie of horror tradition, because we kind of see him every time something takes a hard left turn.
Mm-hmm. And they're good turns.
Yeah, and this movie does an incredible job of baiting and switching you. And I think part of the reason that happens is because they do such a good job setting up expectations of following tradition.
Right.
Because the first kill to set up the movie, the beginning of the framing device is somewhat tropey in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah,
very
definitely.
tropey.
It sets up, the idea of by blowing out this jack-o'-lantern, she breaks tradition and she has to die for it, essentially.
You can't blow out those jack-o'-lanterns.
And even and even that like whole first build up to is approached very tropey. You get the POV of Treat Boy, as he's like zeroing in on her. You have her getting startled by bumping into her like Halloween decorations, like the dangling limbs and stuff. You have her pulling the sheets off of all like the
spooky
scarecrows.
ghosts.
So it's like, oh well, she's gonna pull it off, and there's gonna be somebody under there. But then.
Cut away to the husband.
Yeah, cut away to the husband who just falls asleep watching a porno VHS.
Like immediately, because not that much time could have passed.
Correct.
Yeah.
So he just put on a horror, like, or he put on a porno, and then just passed out immediately, like.
Well, yeah,
in his clothes, still clothed.
And I love at one point, like, he wakes up and he, like, sits up and looks at the porn and sees that it's still on, and he just, like, smiles and lays back down.
Just checking.
It's like, I have to fall asleep to the comforting sounds of hardcore sex.
Yeah. Because they kind of, they immediately, like, the film, like, it's like probably like the eighth shot in cut is him looking at his wife's ass and being like, hey, you want to bang? And then she's like, no, I have to like
take
make
down
my
the
mom
Halloween
happy. Yeah.
decorations.
So like I guess the husband is that's his archetype is he's sexually obsessed. And
Right.
It's weird. It's just a weird interaction like with this character.
Yeah, but it is also very tropey. You know?
Oh, extremely. Yeah.
So it's setting
Well,
up
like him
all
being
of this
being
stuff.
lechy is as tropey as it gets, but like just the I'm just talking about specifically him running the porno and falling asleep in his
Right.
clothes in his bed and then waking back up after 15 minutes, checking that it's still going, smiling and going back to sleep, still clothed, while his wife is taking down Halloween decorations. Like,
Yeah.
What?
I love it only because he said he was going to help take down decorations, and then he just falls asleep watching a porno.
which they
instead.
do make it clear that like he does seem to evade tasks because she makes a reference to him like playing games, all like video games all the time.
Yeah.
Right. I was gonna say like a further subversion of that first kill trope is that you expect the treat boy to be under one of the sheets, but then he's in the box where she's putting all of the Halloween decorations, which I also really love. And then it sort of expands from there and gets into setting up the I guess four main
The through line.
the four main stories. You know, you have the setup of like the like college age girls going to a party with like Anna Paquin. You have the kids walking around collecting jack-o'-lanterns, the principal, and then Brian Cox, the curmudgeon-y old neighbor. And it sets all of them up early on, but then each one of them is its own self-contained story, which I like a lot, because that way when it transitions into other ones, it's like, oh, these are people that I've seen before. I know who these people are. It's not like, who the fuck are these people all of a sudden, you know?
And there's enough like action at the beginning of each of the sequences too that the pacing, it never really leaves you want for more. The chronology is good, the pacing is good.
Well, I like the first shot that we get right after the opening credits is the fat kid dragging his bag of candy through the mud, essentially.
Just being a little
And it's just a
stereotype.
big white pillowcase, just like covered in mud on the
Knocking
bottom.
He's just knocking off jack-o'-lanterns,
fences.
being a little shit. He's got chocolate smeared across his mouth. He's very Augustus Gloop.
Yeah. Every 80s fat kid archetype.
Right, and they're immediately setting him up to be a little shithead, so you're not gonna care when he dies a few minutes later.
For a lot of these like slasher movies, like that trope kind of tends to rub me the wrong way. I like actually being afraid in a lot of contexts, but here it was very welcome. The film is very self-aware, and
Yeah,
it's laughing with you
Exactly.
always, and I appreciated it.
It's very tongue in cheek.
But at the beginning, I didn't like when they were setting that up with the fat kid. I was still, dipping my toes into the water of this movie.
Well, I
And
think the nice-
I was a little like, oh yeah, they're setting me up. I'm not gonna care when
Yeah,
the kid
no,
dies.
you kept thinking about the logic of the movie. You kept pointing that shit out.
Yeah, I mean, like it's called Trick or Treat and it's a horror movie. Like I wasn't getting like that deep into it, but like just like basic stuff. Like okay, why is the porch dark? Why are they like just carving the pumpkin when kids are already out and about for Halloween? there was, just a few like little things. I was being nitpicky.
That's why I think that this movie so well captures like the spirit of the Halloween season too, because like Halloween is about fun and also, being able to be scared. You go to haunted houses, you watch scary movies. It's the time of year that we all kind of want to have fun being scared.
Oh yeah, and
although for us that's like all the time.
Most definitely. And in defense too of both the movie and your point you were making just a second ago, Ben. Like the film's core focus is on repeating traditions and horror movie tropes, and that self-awareness becomes very, very
right. Well,
prevalent.
it like I was saying, it is also like about having fun.
Yes.
It's a very fun horror movie.
At its core, yes.
And they made really good calls to set me up to be sort of cynical, and also one of the biggest tropes or traditions you can have in any of these sorts of slasher Halloween movies is that they don't apply logic.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, like, the nice thing about the self-awareness of this movie is it's not like overly wink wink nudge nudge tongue in cheek. It's more in the spirit. It doesn't get caught up in
its own meta.
It's
never
more done in the
masturbatory.
spirit of fun
Right.
than anything, and this is a short movie. This is only like 80 minutes long.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have any time to overstay its welcome at any point either, which is really nice.
And it does a really good job of like fitting 4 complete short stories into 80 minutes, and giving them all the time that they need, and none of them feeling rushed or overdone. Whereas like with a lot of anthology movies, there's generally like one that is really standout. I think of something like fucking VHS 2, which overall is not a great movie, but has one really good segment that is given the most amount of time and is the standout of the film, where all of the ones in this movie are treated equally, and I think equally well done.
Yeah.
There's nothing that I think is particularly much higher quality above any of the others.
Yeah, it's anthologies are very often utilized, I think, as an excuse for poor writing because it only lasts for such a short each segmented arc only lasts for such a short span of time that if it's bad, the next one queues up.
It's easy for an
and you can get away with
anthology to
it.
be inconsistent because they are so disparate.
And a lot of anthologies have different writers and directors for each segment.
Very true.
Not all of them, but VHS is one of those,
Grindhouse,
or
et cetera,
Grindhouse, or like the ABCs of Death. So it can be really, really spotty and inconsistent.
But not in this case.
But not in this case, because it's all done by the same group of people.
Well, and I think
And they
it's
were good.
partially because they're so interconnected too in a lot of
Yes.
ways.
Yeah.
I think because of that, like, it ties it all together in a really nice bow.
They all exist in the same universe, and
Yeah.
they're taking place simultaneously.
Yeah, as a viewer, you feel like you're going from house to house and you're trick-or-treating with the characters.
Yeah,
and you're kind
exactly.
of bumping into the same people from your neighborhood. And no, it does a great job of putting you into the film for, the core themes of the holiday.
Yeah, definitely. Do y'all want to talk a little bit specifically about each one of the stories?
Yeah, so
Rundown.
we got the beginning framing out of the way. We don't have to talk about that anymore, really. But let's start with the first one with the creepy Dylan Baker dad character.
Yeah.
Dylan Baker is low-key one of my favorite character actors. And he doesn't ever, like, outshine any main actors, but as, like, characters, he does such a good job.
Such a great mark in a character actor, for sure.
Yeah.
When he was first introduced and he gives away his cue that he is like a spooky, killer, a psycho principal. I think at that point I had very low expectations because the opener, kind of sets you up to have that. This film played me very well, like for sure. I definitely hit all the marks that they wanted me to hit as a viewer. And it had me saying, oh man, you know, like he's really wasted on this film. And I ended up eating my words, like, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, he's fantastic. He's just the first good thing in the movie for me.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Intentionally.
he's definitely an early indication of quality, I think. Well, his
said.
his first line when the fat kid is like taking all of the candy that he's left out on the porch, his first line something like, "Now that can't be good for your diabetes." And then he poisons he gives the fat kid poison candy, and he vomits up blood and chocolate all over the steps.
Yeah, it's all gross and gurgly and
Yeah, the sound design in this movie is really good.
Yeah.
Just like continually throughout. The way that progresses from there, and the way they're revealing new information and the little clever things they do, like having him bring him into the house, and then immediately some kids show up and knock on the door, and he answers the door, and he's got like blood all over him, and he's like trying to calm them down when they're screaming, and they're just like, "Oh, great costume, Principal Wilkins." And he's like, "Oh yeah,
sure is.
costume." And then when he's got the hole dug in the backyard, and he's like burying the body, and then his kid starts yelling out the window at him.
Yeah. And like, to be clear too, like nice costume, to the person who's actually a spooky monster is super done. But again, credit to the film, like it even though it's tropey and it's been done hundreds of times, like the execution was great. It still made us laugh.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is it still wraps around this idea of tradition. When they first scream, you think, oh, they know he's crazy or something. And then they play, it's just tradition of Halloween, You're expected to have spooky things out and about.
You're expected to be scared.
The other thing I like is he poisons this kid and drags him to his backyard to put him in this big hole that he dug. But in the hole, there's already a body
Another
there.
body.
Yeah.
So it plays into this idea of tradition in either that he does it to multiple kids every year, or like it's an every year thing. And even
Maybe that was just last week
and yeah, even when he's talking
or that night.
he keeps getting interrupted by his kid in the window.
Which was so funny because you don't expect that like this killer would like have a young child. So like the first time his son like starts yelling at him out the window, like, "Can we carve jack-o'-lanterns now?" Yeah. He's like, "Go inside and watch Charlie Brown. Charlie Brown's an asshole."
And like they almost, like, for casting that kid, they almost certainly had a lineup, and I can just see whoever was in charge of casting just being like, this kid, like he's so expressive. He's got a really wide mouth and like the curly red hair.
Yeah,
like,
they got like
perfect pick.
They got like the most adorable, charming child they could find.
Yeah,
and snarky too. Like,
right,
it's good
and charismatic, and he's just like the perfect foil to the principal.
Yeah.
Because he seems really like cherubic and sweet and innocent. Meanwhile, his dad is like burying bodies in the backyard. But then they end up subverting that as well.
While they were talking to the kid through the window, Dylan Baker's character offhandedly mentioned about the tradition he had with his grandpa. So, like,
right.
It plays into this idea that this has been done.
This is multi-generational.
Yeah, this is a family ordeal, And I really like how they set that up subtly.
Yeah, it's true.
Right.
And during that same time, like, the reason it's subtle is that they're much more directly implying that the kid is pissing off the dad, and he's kind of holding the knife behind him, and he's like, yeah, we'll carve up that pumpkin. And like you get the vibe that he wants to kill his kid.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, let's go
kid's in
down.
danger.
We'll go down into the basement. And like you said, he has the knife behind his back, and the kid gets down to the basement. He's like, let's carve a scary face this year. And you have him behind the kid, like raising the knife.
And like the camera pans up so you can't see the kid.
And he brings the knife down, and there's this really gross sound. You're like, oh no, he killed.
And blood spatters up the side of his face. So I'm thinking like, oh, I guess they didn't want to do anything,
get a shot
fancy
of the knife with the blood on it.
Yeah, that's
and
what it is.
everything.
Pulls it
Yeah,
out,
like
not it's on his face. And I was about ready to check out of the movie at this point. Like I was like, all right, it's been tropey. They just like They just killed the kid. There's nothing fancy here because that's all it could be. And then the camera pans out.
And there's the fat kid's head on a lazy Susan on the table, and he and the kid are like spinning it around together. So, and then that also implies that this is a tradition that they both do every year, because the kid says, "Let's make a scary face this year."
Yeah.
So, continuing on that tradition, he's training his little boy to be a psycho as well, which is, one of the first times that they really dramatically subvert your expectation,
left turn, yeah.
like a really dramatic left turn, and then they keep doing that throughout the rest of the movie. By the end of that first little standalone story, I think you're meant to have a pretty good idea of what the rest of the movie's going to be. It's sort of, like you said, it sets you up to think that it's going to be one thing, but then by the end of that, it's like, okay, they're taking this in a much different direction.
That story is honestly my personal favorite of the bunch, just because I think it's so excellently executed, especially with how good of an actor Dylan Baker is, and how when he's burying the kid, like he keeps getting interrupted between his kid in the window and Brian Cox next door.
Oh yeah.
Who
Smells like a whore out here.
Yeah.
What are you doing down there, Wilkins? Hiding bodies?
And yeah, so it does such a good job of setting up this idea of tradition, and it's just really well executed, and it doesn't overplay its hand or overstay its welcome.
I think it might be my personal favorite as well. But like I said before, it's not particularly because the others are poorly executed or not as good. That one's just, I think it's my favorite.
And especially since that isn't necessarily the culmination of that segment. There is more to do with his character.
Oh yeah,
and
sure.
And that and if you include how that continues to progress, then I would agree as well. Like I think Brian Cox's arc. I mean, not Brian Cox.
Dylan Baker.
Yeah, Dylan Baker's arc is probably my favorite as a character.
Right. I mean, we do see him again later, and his storyline concludes in the third one, but it is still somewhat standalone in the sense that like that's the only one that's like about him specifically, and it is it does have a beginning and an end on its own. But that's just credit.
Really, essentially, like this film isn't necessarily an anthology. It primes you to think that the divergent plot lines will stay divergent, and then they actually do coalesce.
I would say it's an anthology. I mean, each story, like, at its core, stands alone. Yeah. Like, the details in them are interconnected, and they live in the same world. And they do a great job of making them live in the same world.
But like all of the arcs do correlate at the end.
Yeah, for sure, but you could cut each one out separately and watch it by itself, and it would still make sense. So in that sense, I definitely think that it is an anthology, but by having them all interconnected and take place in the same world, it avoids that spottiness and that inconsistency, and that ultimately the whole film feels naturally cohesive.
It does a great job of world building too, without just giving info dumps or explanations.
The exposition is good. Like the bus driver sequence is, doesn't overstay its welcome. And
let's go into that a little bit more.
That's the second one,
so the next story covers 3 of the trick-or-treaters that showed up at the house where Dylan Baker answered the door, and they screamed. And they ask Dylan Baker if they can take one of the jack-o'-lanterns for a UNICEF charity thing.
A UNICEF scavenger hunt. They have to collect jack-o'-lanterns, or so they claim. But it's then revealed that later on they're going to the old abandoned quarry, which is another very tropey thing, to offer the jack-o'-lanterns as like a sacrifice to the 8 children who died there in the school bus massacre. Which is, once again, a very tropey setup that they don't end up concluding in that same manner. Along the way, they pick up this other girl who, as they describe her, is an idiot savant, because she carves jack-o'-lanterns real good. I don't know.
She has no social skills.
And she has no social skills.
She has no social skills, but she knows facts.
Yes.
She has read Wikipedia.
Which, by all writers' tropes, means she's intelligent.
Right. It turns out that their plan all along was to, like, play an elaborate prank on her and, scare her into thinking that, like, the ghosts of the dead kids have, like, come back.
Yeah, and so they go down to the quarry where the bus has crashed, and the elevator going down can only take 3 people at a time.
Well, it can take more than that. It's that the girl was jealous.
Well, she's jealous because the guy she likes is flirting with the other girl, but also they have to leave the other girl up at the top of the quarry so they have time to get
set everything up.
Set up the prank at the bottom.
Okay, so it could only take 3, but she just made it them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they set up this fairly elaborate prank, and pretty well done prank. Like, at first, you're not sure if it's a prank or not when she first sees all the zombie stuff. And, like, the small kid, he's, like, getting his intestines ripped out. It's a lot of effort put into a prank.
It's a studio amount of effort.
For, like, middle schoolers.
Yeah, to the point where you don't know right off the bat that it's a prank.
Right, which it then subverts your expectation after, like, the girl trips and falls and, like, hits her head on a rock, and then the other kids are like, oh shit, like, did we take this too far? And then they reveal themselves as, being tricksters. And at that point, it kind of sets you up to think, like, oh, maybe they accidentally killed her and now, like, her spirit is going to take vengeance on them or whatever, which is something that has been done in a lot of horror films, very tropey. But then it turns out there actually are zombie children from the bus crash, which then come out and kill all of them.
Which, one of the reasons I absolutely loved that in the background of one of the scenes you see Scooby-Doo Zombie Island playing, because that was the first Scooby-Doo, like, storyline that had actual monsters in it.
Right.
And subverted those expectations.
Well, that's later on in the movie, when in the fourth one, when Brian Cox is watching TV and he's flipping through. But that's...
But the zombies being real is a direct, like...
Yeah, exactly. They do a lot of nice little nods to, like, Halloween culture.
Yeah, they pay tribute very nicely. They definitely like display that they are showing homage, like, to Wishbone. Footnote on that. And
it's definitely a love letter to Halloween.
Yeah, it's like, I really enjoy the Halloween season. I'm gonna make something that perfectly encapsulates it.
Which for me was very satisfying after, the last movie I watched with you guys was The fucking Nun. And
yeah, you weren't here for Halloween 2018.
Yeah, so sorry, Lo siento, boys. But the Nun was just so...
You missed out. That was a good movie.
I know. I'll have to catch it out on my own time at some point. But my point with the Nun just rips from films, other, greater works, consistently, and they never pay tribute.
Right, it's not homage. It ends up being like
imitation.
Yeah, well, I mean, to the point of, like, self-parody, like,
whereas this film, like, is textbook perfect way to display homage. Yeah. Like, very, very pleased with this movie on that front.
And so the one girl who was the one who's pranked, she runs into the elevator and decides to not save the other kids, either as vengeance for them playing a prank on her, or she doesn't know if this might just be a continuation of the prank, which I think is also a fun dynamic. Because, like, the one boy is like, this isn't part of the prank, like, this is real, like, let us in, and she just goes back up because, like, she's just been pranked horribly, so she doesn't know if the joke is still on her or what. And
there's also that implication that because the zombie children on the bus were all, handicapped to some degree, and that she's sort of, they implied that she's, like, probably, like, in the special class and whatnot, that like she's sort of
On
like
the spectrum or
on
something.
the spectrum. Yeah, like
yeah.
she is tied to them in some way. Like
Has a sense of kinship with
yeah.
them.
And
yeah.
she was like spouting like general facts about Halloween. Like I almost got a vibe that she was a part of that to some degree.
She was very into Halloween.
Yeah.
Well, right, and she talks about how, like, the original pagan tradition of Halloween and human sacrifice and stuff. So, yeah, maybe leaving the kids there to die was for her, you know, making a sacrifice on All Hallows Eve or whatever. You know, it's layered, you know, there's so much that you can pack into, you know, such a little moment, you know, which, you know, that's just good writing.
Oh yeah, the film's dense.
It is,
yeah,
which is
for little nods.
for being fucking 80 minutes long, like
yeah, and tropey as hell. Like it's very good.
yeah, without having too much packed into such a short amount of time. All right, well, let's move on to the third one, which revolves around Anna Paquin and her friends.
Back to the Paquin.
God damn. Y'all probably can't hear these people running around upstairs, but it's fucking obnoxious as shit.
Yeah, it's like there's a WWE match like going on above us right now.
I'm gonna go up and RKO somebody here in a minute. But yeah, so Anna Paquin and her friends, they're, you know, we see them early on in the movie getting into their costumes. Anna Paquin is dressed like Little Red Riding Hood. You know, they're going to...
All the girls are dressed as Disney princesses.
Yeah, they're going to this Halloween party, and they're like picking up dates along the way, which is funny, and it's kind of confusing at first because like these are all your standard like super sexy slutty college girls that you'd see in a Halloween movie, but the dudes they're picking up as their dates are all like schlubby and like nerdy and stuff like that.
Which again, pretty standard fare, and I was definitely keying into the fact like that they were just telling me, oh, yep, they're slutty there, so they have to die. You know, like your standard.
Yeah, well,
you know,
and Anna Paquin is set up as like the virgin character,
Right,
Like her Red Riding Hood costume is pretty reserved and
modest compared to the
modest.
other girls.
botanical. Yeah.
And yeah, and all of her friends are like pressuring her and like you have to get laid at some
You're
point.
22.
You're
How have you not
22
gotten
and you're a
laid yet?
virgin. Like you gotta do blah blah blah. And she's like, well, I always imagined my first time being special. You know, all of this like super tropey nonsense.
Well, looking back on it, one of the things I like about that stuff is they call her a virgin, but they never say specifically getting laid.
And
I think the reason is it's a virgin to the tradition of what they do.
Of what they're doing. Yeah, no, you're right. They never specifically refer to
But it
sex.
does play into that trope 100%.
Well, right, because you know they are set up as like the traditional immoral teenagers or college kids who are, you know, just debauched, you know, so of course they have to die as punishment, you know.
And it plays it up with, you know, them finding all these schlubby dudes to pick up too.
Right. But it does like leave you sort of questioning like what the fuck is going on? Like these girls could, you know, be hooking up with anybody. Like why are they all picking up these like sort of schlubby weirdos? But that all culminates really nicely. They also set up early on that there's like a vampire out and about. We see him kill this one girl, you know, but he's got a mask on and we see his fangs and shit. And so later on, Anna Paquin is walking through the woods on her way to this party in her fucking Red Riding Hood gear, you know, so, and she's accosted by the vampire and we see him bite her and she screams, and then it cuts to like the party where they're all just like in the woods, you know, presumably getting drunk. They have a bonfire or whatever, and a body falls from the trees that is wearing the Red Riding Hood outfit. So we assume it's Anna Paquin until they go over and turn it over, and it's the vampire guy in the Red Riding Hood cloak.
Yeah.
I like how
Which
they
I like
set up...
because I was thinking about it at first and I thought, oh, you know, they're just doing it as like a trick to the audience. It doesn't really make any sense. But it does, like Anna Paquin's character. She's pranking her friends there with that.
Yeah.
Right.
And they do a good job of setting up the quote-unquote vampire character, because you get one disparate scene earlier where he kills this woman
At a Halloween parade.
in the Halloween
in the
parade.
back alley. It is very disparate. It feels super out of place. It's like what the fuck? But then once again, it concludes very neatly.
A nice little bow.
Yeah. Well, and then once they roll him over and see that it's that dude, you know, Anna Paquin, you know, comes out of the shadows, but nobody seems like freaked out or anything.
Yeah.
So that's another indication that there's something weird going on. And then they take off his mask, and it's Dylan Baker
It's old Principal Dad.
wearing fake vampire fangs.
Which, note on that, I really appreciated because during the shouting conversation he has with his son in the first arc, one of the things he says to his son says, "Can we go to the parade later, Dad?" And he says, "No, I
have a date.
I have a date." Yeah, and so they cue that up in that conversation too. Like that conversation cues up like half the movie.
Yeah, it does.
I really enjoyed that even though the son is also like the little kid is also a killer, the dad wanted to just like have his own me time and get some kills in on his own.
Yeah, exactly.
Like-
He wants to go out and cosplay vampire on Halloween,
Yeah.
you know, and kill people. Yeah. But then all of the girls at the party start like, well, then we pan out and we see that there's
before that they unmask him, but they also reveal that he is not a vampire.
right.
Like,
Well, yeah, that's why I
take
said
his
they
teeth
take
out.
his
Sorry,
they take his fake fangs out. And then they like pan out and we see like the whole party, and we see that there's like a bunch of dead bodies lying around.
all the nerds,
You know, all the schlubs that they've brought, and the girls all start like taking off their clothes and stuff, and we see that they have vampire fangs, and it's like, oh, they're the real vampires all along. But then it goes even farther, and once they're naked, they start ripping their skin off, which...
well done too. Yeah.
Oh my god. Well, I mean, it's Michael Dougherty. Similarly to Krampus, there's a lot of really fucking good practical effects in this movie.
Which I was so not expecting. I saw the budget for this movie, or I saw how budgeted the movie was, and I was thinking, okay, it's going to be some CG shots. It's not going to be anything that impressive.
There's a tiny bit of
gonna be a guy in
CG
a
here.
mask. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a tiny bit of CG here and there, but it's mostly practical.
And the
And I
CG
was
is
very
well
pleasantly
done
surprised
when it does appear.
Oh yeah,
well,
it's
'cause
tasteful.
it's subtle.
Yeah.
It does what it needs to do, and it's not overused. They still choose to rely most heavily on practicals.
It's blended in with practicals too, so
Yeah.
it doesn't feel out of place.
And I think that whole scene where they're like ripping off their skin and revealing themselves to be werewolves, which was great considering the Little Red Riding Hood thing beforehand.
Yeah.
I think that the first little story with Dylan Baker is my favorite story of them all, but I think that scene of them transforming
It's my favorite moment.
in the woods is my favorite scene of the movie.
And again, like that was my footnote from earlier too, because that is where Dylan Baker's plotline comes to a very
Yeah.
literal end, and so counting that into the first plot line as well, I think, it's fantastic.
Yeah, but it's I would say the scene that veers most into like legitimate horror, I think, with them like pulling their fucking skin off and shit. Like it looks really good, and it's gross and like visceral and kind of scary. I think it's maybe the least tongue-in-cheek moment in the movie.
I don't know. I think that the Brian Cox stuff at the end is we'll come back to that, but I think it's a little bit more genuine in its delivery. Like I mean, it's so over the top with him ripping her skin off and stuff that like I was never like afraid or concerned. You know, like
Yeah.
it's.
I mean,
I don't know, though.
I was grossed out
It's
though.
it's a celebration of horror, but like they've already killed everybody for the most part.
It has
like,
a
it's
more
not-
yucko effect.
Yeah.
Well,
and the one person they are like that hasn't died at that point is the evil murderer. Like no one is at risk that I'm concerned.
I mean,
for.
I suppose, but like, it's you can still put yourself in his shoes.
Oh yeah,
like
because he's a very likable serial killer.
Right. He's funny, and you know it's very much turned on its head for him. You know, the hunter becomes the hunted, but like then he sees all of these people dead around him and all of these like sexy girls transforming monstrously
Into great puppetry werewolves.
and like you know that his end is not gonna be pleasant.
Yeah.
So like in that sense, I think it is pretty effective horror.
Oh, very effective. I mean, I'll definitely agree with you on that. Yeah.
One of
it's
my
very effective.
favorite things about that scene too is the attention to little details. In the scene or in the story before it with the trick-or-treaters, they stop at the drunk mom's house where she's a sexy cat.
Right.
And in the background you see this guy, I think it was supposed to be the gym teacher.
The coach,
The coach, in a hot dog outfit.
Like fucking a pig.
Fucking a pig, someone in a pig costume. And right at the end, when, Dylan
Amongst
Baker's
the nerds.
character is dying, you see a dude in a hot dog costume like roll out.
Yeah, someone's dragging the hot dog costume. That's
I love that.
a nice little nod to something previous.
Good callback.
Yeah, no, I liked that a lot. Okay, well, let's talk about the last one, and then we'll wrap it up with the conclusion of the film.
And one final point on that last arc too,
Oh, sure.
like, that I love is that the twist on the twist of them not being vampires, is that they're all teen wolves, and so even then when it subverts your expectation, it's still like pulling from like a direct source with like Teen Wolf.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
great.
It's still properly campy.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's great. I really like that sequence.
Yeah,
That's all
and
I had.
they pushed the camp in the final story to 11. The final story covers Brian Cox's character. He's the old curmudgeon that lives next door to Dylan Baker that talks to him through the fence. And this happens pretty much at the same time as
Right.
that story. But you start by having some trick-or-treaters come to his house, and the door opens, and these scary eyes appear in the darkness.
Yeah, these like glowing eyes, and you hear like something growling.
Which is right out of the Halloween episode of Wishbone. And I was saying that to them. I was like, oh yeah, that reminds me of Wishbone. And you see like the kids run from the glowing eyes. And I was just happy because it reminded me of that. But I didn't think it was a direct association until they reveal that it's the old man and he's put glowing eyes on his pet dog because he's an old curmudgeon. He doesn't want to deal with the kids.
Well, on top of that, he wanted their candy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
he
love
tried to
that
steal
little
he stole
detail,
their
yeah.
candy.
Which is amazing. And but you see that the dog is the same breed as Wishbone, so it was again like a really nice homage to that. Like just made my childhood self so happy.
Yeah, which is like an extreme deep cut.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Because like I only watched Wishbone as a kid because I didn't have cable, so I watched
Same.
PBS, and I loved Wishbone, but
Yeah, Wishbone's amazing.
I honestly wonder how many people even our age would really remember Wishbone if you
Oh, yeah.
if you tried talking to them about it.
And I was saying to you guys too, and I think it's really relevant to this film that Wishbone was my first real key example of subverting expectation in a narrative. Like that Halloween episode ends with the kids seeing spooky eyes at the top of the stairs, and then it's revealed that it's a cat. And then the kids are like, oh, cool, it's not a spooky ghost. And they leave, and the cat leaves, and the camera hangs on the stairs for a second, and then you see two red eyes. And it goes to credits. And as a child, it terrified me. And it was, again, my first example of subverting expectation. And how beautiful is it this movie, that is all about that, pays homage to that moment.
Yeah.
And it is also right after that when Brian Cox is eating their candy and he's flipping through you know, the TV channels, and there's all these like horror movies and stuff on, and one of them that he flips past is Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, like we talked about earlier. That I thought that was also a really nice little homage.
On those homages.
Well, and it kind of ties all of the framing narrative back around in a lot of ways, because this is where, you know, the treat boy from the beginning is the main villain again.
Good old treat boy.
And it kind of wraps it around, because the idea of tricking the trick-or-treaters for their treats
gets you tricked.
Is the reason, the treat boy comes to begin with, essentially, to wreak havoc on him.
Well, he comes for anyone who breaks tradition.
Exactly. You know, it has this idea of tradition.
He is the Halloween antibody.
And punishment for breaking from
right,
that.
and he's the only thing up to this point that has not been explained, because we've seen him in every single other story before this. You know, he comes to Dylan Baker's door with the other kids to trick or treat in the first one. Then in the second one, when the girl escapes and she goes, you know, back up the elevator, he is at the top of the elevator there. And then in the woods, as they're killing Brian Cox, it pans up and he's sitting on a log watching the whole thing. So like, he's been throughout this movie, but has been a mystery up until now, when he becomes the actual villain. And that whole scene with Brian Cox is like, this whole sequence gives me a lot of like Home Alone vibes a little bit. not so much in the sense that like they're setting up traps, but also kinda, you know, like Treat Boy attacks him with like a candy bar that has like a box cutter in it. Like, it's
delightful.
Like a little knife. And then
that's his like bladed hands. That's his like machete.
Yeah, it plays into
he has a candy bar with a fucking box
the
cutter
idea
in it.
of being careful about, you know, candy with razor blades in it.
Right, exactly. And, you know, then later when Brian Cox, like, falls down the stairs, because the stairs are covered in candy and more razor blades and glass, you know, like, the whole thing just, like, gave me a very Home Alone Home Alone vibe.
Brian Cox's facial reactions for everything are just so delightful. Like the movie is just laughing along with you the whole time.
It's hilarious because like Treat Boy is like, I mean, it's obviously a child in a costume, you know, like it's a little kid, and just like this little tiny demon child, like just wreaking havoc with Brian Cox and like jumping on his back from the ceiling and like wrestling around with him. Like it's funny. It's kind of cute.
It's hilarious. And I will say, like, as comedic as it is, that sequence to me, I think I was saying it earlier, that sequence I found to be the most tension built, the most
really?
Like,
you think so?
I think so. Like, it had like a lot of really nice like slow shots of this, like the empty stairs and the especially like the lighting in those sequences. It was a lot like darker. I found that sequence to be visually at least to be
See, for me, that one felt the most generic of all of them.
That's probably...
It feels like it still does things to subvert expectations, but it feels the most like a standard run-of-the-mill horror movie.
It's the weakest of the stories, and for me,
I think so. I think so too. For me,
because it doesn't have quite enough time to flesh itself out too much.
Mm-hmm. I think maybe weakest is the wrong word. It's definitely the simplest.
Yeah, I do think, like, I don't think it's bad, but I do think that in comparison to the other three, it is a bit weaker.
It's definitely not nuanced or complex, but I think like it does what
it's
it sets
not
out to
bad.
do. Yeah,
It's still
weakest.
good.
Exactly.
But it's
and like
my least favorite of the bunch.
I agree.
But like what it does really well. Yeah. And I think it's the most over the top of the bunch. And in a lot of ways, it's one of the most fun of the bunch.
Yeah.
Just because you have this very larger than life character, you know, jumping around and causing havoc.
Crawling on the ceiling and having a razor blade candy bar.
And when he like rips the mask, like the like sack, the burlap sack mask off, and it's revealed that Treat Boy under his mask has like a literal pumpkin head with like a skeleton's face kind of.
I thought that was really well designed too. The first time I saw this movie, I thought it was actually kind of spooky.
The animatronics in his face are fantastic. Like you get like a lot of like the eyebrow and lip movements.
It's very expressive.
Nose twitches and the eyelids are pretty dramatic. Like it's great puppetry. Like really unexpectedly good puppetry, and I love puppetry.
Yeah, no, it looks great. And to, then Brian Cox, like, shoots him a bunch with the shotgun and, like, blows one of his arms off.
And it's all pumpkin bits.
Yeah, it's all pumpkin bits. And is, like, laying in the corner, and you're like, okay, Brian Cox thinks it's dead.
And he does his job, right? Like, he does check the boxes. He double taps it, like, immediately.
He triple taps it.
Yeah,
he shoots it 3 times.
Because they were kind of playing it up to think, like, he's going to walk down the hallway, and before he shoots it, he's going to get attacked, and he doesn't. He's smart. He just fucking keeps shooting into it. Like,
well, yeah, the third shot, he even shoots off
its
hand,
arm, because then the hand shortly thereafter takes on a life of its own and comes back after him.
Unplugs the phone line.
Unplugs the phone line.
Yeah.
Very, very much like Evil Dead 2.
Yes.
Paying more homage to other things. And then when it reattaches itself to Treat Boy's body. And what does he say? What's his reaction to that we all commented on that was so good? He has a line, it's just like, oh no, or something that. Yeah. It's just like, oh no. Which is the proper response.
Yeah.
At the same time, it's so run of the mill.
Well, it's you could just hear the undertone under it, like beneath his voice, where he's just saying like, "God damn it."
Yeah, exactly.
Like, he's more perturbed by it. Like he knows he's gonna die, but even then, as like a curmudgeon-y old man, he's more just displeased than he is like terrified or angry. I think that's what I love about the whole sequence is that he never. There are a few times where he looks scared, but he's never like, you never get the vibe that he's like panicked. He's just kind of like, fuck, I'm gonna die now. God damn it. And that's really amusing.
Yeah.
And I love how the Treat Boy's new weapon after that is he's got like one of those big round,
lollipops,
comedically large lollipops, and he takes like a big bite out of it, and it is in like a sickle shape, like a serrated sickle shape, and Brian Cox is lying on the floor, and Treat Boy is coming over to him, and he raises up the lollipop, and he brings it down. And then you see that he's just stabbed the candy bar that's like resting on Brian Cox's chest. And he like picks it up and then turns around and walks away. Like he wasn't actually trying to kill him. He was just like wreaking general havoc.
Just teaching him a lesson to not trick kids.
Now that he had his treat, he can go away.
Right, exactly. Like... He fed the Treat Boy. And then it's revealed that Brian Cox was the bus driver who drove the bus into the quarry 30 years prior.
Yeah. Well, and the scene after that, you get to see Brian Cox with a bit of a change of heart. He's in like he's like, all
bandaged up.
Yeah, and he opens the door for trick-or-treaters and gives them a huge handful of candy. Yeah. One of them comments that he looks like a mummy.
He's like, "Great mummy costume, mister." And he's just like all bandaged up from this battle he's just had.
Yeah, and he's like just like giving these kids candy out of like traditional fear that they like the Treat Boy will come back.
He pulls it out of his like
the sling that his arm just has a bunch of candy in there. And then it ties up very nicely with someone knocking on his door again, and he answers it, and it's all the zombie children from the bus who have come to take their vengeance on him after 30 years, and cut to credits. So yeah, it does a really fucking fantastic job of like all of these stories being standalone but still interconnected in a way that feels cohesive.
Well, it took me the whole podcast to like find the word I was looking for, but I finally found it, and the movie's a Halloween allegory.
A allegory.
Yeah. Nice.
This is a fucking great Halloween movie. If you are listening to this episode on Halloween and you need something fun tonight to watch to get you in the mood while you wait for trick-or-treaters to come to your door before you go out and get totally blasted like you should.
Go meet some werewolves.
Or
Yeah,
some...
watch this one.
This is a fucking great movie. It's it really perfectly encapsulates what Halloween is all about and why it's fun and why it's scary. And
it's only 80 minutes, you know? Like,
Yeah.
you can fit it into your schedule even if you have Halloween plans.
It's weird to say, but in a lot of ways, I think that for this time of year, Trick or Treat is a very good feel-good movie, if you know what I mean.
Oh yeah, again, the movie's laughing with you.
Yeah, it's very campy, it's fun, it's full of jokes, but it still like revels in its craft, and in that takes itself, you know, the proper amount of seriously.
Yeah, it captures the spirit of Halloween
from
really
a production
well.
standpoint, like it takes itself very seriously.
Yeah, like it's not a throwaway. Like it wants to be fun and funny, but it's, you know, it's still a work of artifice.
Yeah,
you know?
and it's got a great budget and it's very well utilized.
The sound design is really good. The score is surprisingly good. It's just really well done. It captures that fun mood of Halloween.
Yeah.
You know, where spooks are happening.
Spooky chills and thrills.
But, like, it's all in good fun at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's, you know, I think it can provide that kind of same feeling as like settling down and on Halloween night to watch like old Vincent Price Halloween specials or something, you know, like it's campy, but you know, it's serious and it's fun, and it's just a really great way to capture the spirit of Halloween, which we've said ad nauseum at this point.
I think that's why the, you know, ideas of tradition in the movie work so well, because the core, you know, ethos of the movie is to capture that, you know,
right,
tradition and feel of trick-or-treating and Halloween as a whole.
Well, speaking of talking about how great this movie is ad nauseum, shall we get to ratings?
Yes. Yeah. Ben, you wanted to do ratings slightly differently for this. You want to rate each of the
we'll just go through really quick
individually.
Let's just go through each one and rate it, and then we can talk about it at the end as a whole, each one of us.
Well, what I was thinking is we can each go down the line and give our ratings for each of the four, and then I can take an average of those four for each of us.
Okay, sure.
To give us, you know, each a rating, and then I'll average those numbers out at the end. So why don't you start, Ben?
Sure. So we'll start with this creepy
Dylan Baker. Yeah.
Well, do we want to include the opening arc?
You know what? I think we'll count that in the Treat Boy one, because it is the
it's the culmination.
Yeah, it's the rapper. It's the rapper story.
The candy
you know?
rapper story.
Yeah, exactly.
I think this one's excellent. Dylan Baker is incredible as always. It really does a good job of starting light and then immediately subverting your expectations and going really dark with it. You know, you start with this almost like after school special scene where he's talking to the kid on the steps, and like it just goes awry when the kid starts puking blood and chocolate.
Right.
And that kind of captures the tone of the movie for the rest of it. And I think the interactions between him and the kid are really great, and the interactions between him and Brian Cox are really great, all in the backyard. It does a great job setting up the rest of the movie really well and subverting your expectations with that final bit. I would give this a 5 out of 5. I think this is a nearly perfect anthology bit, and it's one of my favorite anthology shorts out of any Halloween or horror anthology movies.
Okay. What would you give the Zombie Kids one after that?
I would. I really like that one. I think the Zombie Kids are a really good little bit of exposition in there, but it does a good job of adding details that informs the rest of the stories really well. I like the idea of it's almost like a boy who cries wolf story in a way. You know, they do a bad thing and prank this mentally handicapped person, and that kind of bites them in the butt in the end. It's probably the longest of the four, I think.
I guess so. Yeah.
But I think it's well done. I would give this a 4.5 out of 5.
Now the Werewolf Girls. What would you give that one?
The Werewolf Girls, I think this one as well plays up the idea of tradition really well, with, you know, the virgin slut kind of dichotomy idea that's played to death in horror movies, and kind of turning it on its head in a lot of ways. And as well, you get bait and switched by Dylan Baker's vampire character coming in and seeming like the true villain of the story, and then that all gets flipped on its head. I thought the werewolves effects were pretty incredible. It definitely caught me off guard the first time I saw it. Yeah, and I love how they put in details in it, you know, little things that you might not catch the first time, but, you know, really play into rewatching, and it kind of interconnects everything and builds the world well. I would give this a 4.5 as well. I think it's really well done. Yeah.
And last but not least, Brian Cox and Treat Boy.
The Brian Cox Treat Boy story is really fun. Brian Cox, as always, is incredible. I think the effects of that one are some of the best in the movie. It's a lot of fun. It's the most over the top of the bunch. It's probably the least fleshed out of all of them, which is my biggest problem with it. That being said, I think all anthology movies, the rapper story for all of them is almost always the weakest.
True.
Of the bunch, you know, because you have to, you know, bow tie everything. But it's still a lot of fun, and I think the pumpkin head effect is really well done and kind of creepy, actually. It's very effective. I would give this one a 4.
All right. Well, that means that for you as a whole, the movie would have an average rating of 4.5 out of 5.
Yeah,
pods.
and I think that's the perfect rating for it, because I think this is one of my favorite horror anthology movies. It's one of my favorite Halloween time movies. Mm-hmm. And unlike a lot of, you know, other Halloween movies, it works to directly capture the spirit of Halloween in a lot of ways that other horror movies don't strive for. So I think in that respect, it's really well done. It's great that he followed this up with Krampus, and I'm excited to see what holiday he goes for next, right. Michael Dougherty.
All right, Cleve, let's run through your ratings.
Okay, I'm going to just sort of give a general rundown. I think any issues that I had with individual plot lines were pretty fundamental to the others. For instance, the only story that I would give a rating under 5 out of 5 for would probably be I guess it's the second story with the school bus and the kids. I was a little bored by the exposition, but I think it was all fundamental and necessary, and it was done well. Any issues I had with this movie were in the moment and were very quickly subverted by really solid plot point, left turns. So honestly, yeah, that's why I'm having trouble rating them individually, because I enjoyed all of them well enough, and any problems I had with them were resolved by how they correlated. So
well,
I would say
you said you would give the other 3 a 5 out of 5.
Yeah.
So what would you rate the school bus one out of 5?
4 out of 5.
4 out of 5?
Yeah. I would say under the scope of cinema as a whole, I would give this movie a 4 out of 5, but under the scope of horror films and Halloween themed movies, it's a 5 out of 5. It's fantastic.
If you average out your ratings, that'll give you a rounded up rating of 4.8 out of 5 pods, which I think is, still pretty damn strong.
Yeah.
I think Ben pretty well encapsulated what works about all of the stories individually. So
Agreed.
I'm just going to go.
I didn't want to rehash that.
Yeah. So I'm just going to go through my ratings. The Dylan Baker one, I would definitely give a 5 out of 5. That one's my favorite, and it's really fun. The school bus one, I think I would give a 4 out of 5. Still pretty strong, but that Dylan Baker one at the beginning is kind of hard to follow up, I think. The Werewolf Girls, I would give a strong 4.5 out of 5. I guess the last one, Treat Boy, is the one that I still enjoy, but works the least well for me, for reasons that I've already sort of talked about. I think I would give that one a 3.5 out of 5, all told. So overall, I would give Trick or Treat a 4.3 out of 5 pods. A really fucking great movie for this time of year. Really fun. Something that now that I've seen a second time, I appreciate it even more than the first time I saw it. Who knows? I might want to make a Halloween tradition out of watching this movie because it's fun. So let me give us an overall average. I got to put that together.
4.75, 4.25, and 4.5. That would be 4.5, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be 4.5.
Okay, cool.
4.5 out of 5. I think that's a perfect rating for it because I think this is going to be a classic down the line. I think this is a really well done anthology movie.
And again, too, like out of like the scope of cinema, I would say like a 4.5. But again, for Halloween movies, 5 out of 5 from me.
Yeah, it definitely, I think, is more fun this time of year than watching it any other time of year. Still a good film anytime you watch it, but like watching it during this season gives something a little special to it.
I don't know if like it's as thrilling, chilling, and terrifying as It's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown, but man, it comes close.
Nothing will ever be that truly, viscerally horrifying.
Charlie Brown is an asshole.
Charlie Brown is an asshole. Well, that'll bring us to the end of this episode. Next week, we're doing Suspiria?
I believe so, unless it doesn't show anywhere near us.
Yeah.
But most likely.
Tentatively, next week, we're going to be doing an original versus remake of Suspiria, of course, covering the original Dario Argento and then the new one that just came out. I have basically no expectations for this new Suspiria movie. I have not kept up with it too much outside of what we talked about several months ago.
Well, personally, I've never heard of any of those things. So
you've never heard of
like
Suspiria?
Fun. Ever.
Well, yeah, hopefully the new one will be in a theater near us. I know it's gotten somewhat of a limited theatrical release, so hopefully...
I could see it showing up at Carolina.
Yeah, I could see that too. So hopefully we'll be able to find somewhere to watch it. If we can't, then we'll be doing something different.
Fingers crossed.
So yeah, tentatively tune back next week for an original versus remake of Suspiria. If you like the show, take a few...
How could you not?
Yeah, how could you not?
Yeah, fuck you if you don't.
What he said.
From the horse's mouth.
Yeah, why are you still listening if you don't like it? You're like well into the podcast at this point.
Take a few seconds out of your spooky, scary Halloween day to leave us a spooky, scary Halloween review and a spooky, scary Halloween rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever else you get your podcasts. Follow our spooky, scary Twitter account at PodPeoplePod on Twitter for updates and stuff and previews of what we're doing next, I guess. Follow us on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/PodPeoplePod. Get boxed for a list of all of the films we've talked about on the shows with our average ratings and links to those episodes. Follow me on Twitter at Mr. Van Awesome for spooky, scary tweets all year round.
And I'm at Mr. Sheets if you want some dank memes.
Clebe.
And I'm in a bunker in the middle of West Texas. You can't find me. You never will. Don't look for the clues.
But where can they find your artwork?
They can find it on my art station under Cleveland Mosier. You can also occasionally find me tweeting for the Light Arc Studio Twitter account. Always feel free to tune in there. There's some fun stuff. But yeah, if you want to check out my work and all my cool, spooky, scary creatures I'm painting this time of year, yeah, check out my art station.
I would recommend that. There's a lot of really good work on there.
Oh, thank you.
Cleveland's a master of his craft.
You're gonna make me blush.
Crafto-lantern. Well, thank you as always for listening to the show. We hope you're having a great Halloween, or if you're listening to this after Halloween, that you did the best holiday of the year justice. And we'll be back at you next week with another review of something. So until then, stay scared and check your candy for razor blades. I said that last week, but it's Halloween. I'm saying it again.
And it's more thematically relevant with Trick or Treat.
Yeah. Whatever. Fuck it. It's Halloween. Bye.
Bah!